Hi there! So this week I'm going to be making a couple of really nice cutting boards on my CNC behind me. I've got some really interesting pieces of wood here that I'm going to show you, so stay tuned. Okay, so what I'm going to be using is three different types of woods. I've got what I think is rosewood, it may be bubinga, I'm not sure, but we will probably find out during the video. I've got some normal beech wood, which is European beech. And I've also got these special pieces of wood here which were given to me, and I know they come from Canada, and they've got pretty much the Canada flag in the centre, which makes them really interesting. My plan is to inlay them into there and then have some beech sort of trim around it and whatnot to make it look really interesting. Okay, so the plan is to use this centre section of the wood here. I'm going to mill out a space in here for this to be inlaid in. But the interesting thing about this is I would like the inlay to follow the outline of this tree. So I don't want a perfect circle, I want to follow the natural curve of the wood itself. I've also got these pieces of beech where I might just do some decorative trim around the edge. And I've got some more wood just off shot here, which I'm going to add some beech strips along the sides here to make it just a little bit wider. And I think it's really interesting how these pieces of wood come from Canada. I think they are some sort of Canadian beech wood, but they've got the markings of the Canadian flag in the middle. I think that's really interesting. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to lay out the parts on this cutting board as I want them and then mark them out with a pencil. And then I'm going to photograph them, and I'm going to import them photographs into a program called Fusion 360, where I can then make the tool paths to use them on the CNC and cut them out basically. Okay, so I think I'm settled on sort of a design here. I've made some markings on the pieces of wood to line them up on the computer. I'm not sure about these outside pieces here, but basically I've got like a sort of a yin-yang symbol thing going on here, and out here I've got sort of these arrows that are in the corners here. Not sure, we'll see how it looks on the computer before we mill it all out. So what I've got to do now is I've got to take some pictures of these and import them into Fusion. Okay, so this is Fusion 360, and I've talked shortly about this before, but this is basically where I do all my design work. I'll press play quickly on the bottom of the timeline here, and you'll see quickly my works process of how I got to the end product. So I first took the photos you see, and I made the slices, then I worked on the board a little bit, made the inlay program for the inlays, and then made a final mock-up. I've just turned the canvases on, and let's take a look down here, and you can see what I've done here is I took the picture, if I move it to the top, and I made a curve to go follow the tree slice around the edge. Them slices were then used over here, and I made a plan on how I'm going to fit them in the board. And once I had the plan, I could then make a program to use the sheets of wood. So the bits of wood are these two pieces here. These are the screw holes to fix them in. And then the parts are obviously on there like that. Okay, so I've got rid of all the other stuff, and now you can see the final design here, which I settled on. And what we've got is the slice in the middle with the nice pattern in it. These pieces here are beech wood. And this is, I think it's either mahogany, it could be Iroko, something like that. I'm pretty sure this is either some sort of a beech, maybe a maple, I'm not sure. It's really hard to decide what kind of wood it is when you don't know, you can only guess really. So yeah, that's the final design. Let's see how I did it. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm screwing down what's going to be the base of the cutting board. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to mill off the bottom layer of the board itself. And as you can see, I'm using shims around the edge. That's to ensure that it's not under tension once it's screwed down. I'm going to put screws in two of the corners to hold it while it's being milled. And I don't want it to be pulled down in the corners, because when it's milled flat, it will pop back up and then it will have a twist in. That's all I'm going to do on these parts of the boards for now. And for the tree slices, what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw them in around the edges, and I'm just going to run the mill bit around the edge for now. And to finish off the inlays, I've got the Beech parts. And the Beech parts, the circles that I wanted to cut, actually don't fit on the sheets that I have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically glue the bits together, and there's going to be a little bit that I'm going to need to glue on. You'll see that later on. So after a bit of finishing, bit of sanding and whatnot, the inlays come out really well. As you can see, the circles come out really well. They look really good in there. And these bits as well, we're gonna get to them later, and you'll see what they're for. Okay, so the next job is going to be to put the board back on the CNC with the bottom now down. And I'm going to mill out the slots for the inlays, and I'm also going to cut the edges straight so that I can put 2 more pieces of solid beech on the sides. Okay, so now all the pockets are milled out for the inlays. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sand the edges of the pieces until they fit in the holes really nice and snugly. And I'm going to glue it in on the table, and that's going to help to keep the piece nice and flat. And while that's drying on the table, I'm going to cut some strips for the edges here. So to glue the sides on, I'm just going to use normal wood glue, spread it around with my finger, and then just clamp them on basically. One thing to note is I did make sure that the bottom was flush. So the next part is going to be to get this into a perfectly flat surface. As you can see, we've got all different pieces glued on here, and the top surface is all different heights. These Beech pieces are much higher than the Beech pieces in the inlay section here. So the next job is going to be to get that perfectly flat and cut out. Once that's done, I can get it on the bench and do some sanding and get it all nice and finished. So I'm going to split this into 3 operations. I've got one operation is going to mill down these Beech sections here. The next operation is going to be to mill the surface flat, and the third one is going to be to actually cut the outside contour. So I sanded both the boards all the way up to 320 grit on my orbital sander. I think finishing a project is the most important part of any project. Really take your time getting rid of all the imperfections. And I find that holding the piece up to the light helps me see how far I've got to go and the places I've missed and whatnot. And you can really see the example here. I've got lots of sanding to do. And once all the sanding was done, I decided to add 2 coats of this hard wax oil. It's important to choose a food safe oil or a food safe finish, as this was intended for use in the kitchen. And this oil is rated for kitchen worktops, so it's fine. Now I really love applying oils. It brings out the colour in the wood, and this is where you really see what you've actually made. The first coat of oil was quite a heavy coat. I wanted to give the wood a chance to soak up all the oil that it needed. I let it sit for about 15 minutes. Once it was done, I removed all the excess with a clean rag. And after letting it dry for 24 hours, I did this again, and then it was finished. Now look at the detail on the centre. It's really one of a kind. And on the bottom I decided to add some little feet. I really like these feet because you have to drill a small hole and they are mechanically attached to the board rather than sticky back or gluing them on. Now I am actually thinking about giving one of these away. I've made 2 and I'm unsure on how to do it, but if that's something that you'd like to see, then post a comment or like the video or something like that, and I might do a giveaway. Okay, so that's it for this one. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe and post a comment down below on what you might have done differently. But other than that, I'll see you next week.